way they created our country, was based on the way Moses was told to govern the people in, one of the first 5 books, that, there was thousands, leaders of thousands, leaders of hundreds, leaders of tens, and then if they couldn't figure out the right thing, they were to take it to Moses. But in addition to that, God had already given them, or Moses, the law of truth from which to, govern all of those different bodies.
Yeah, I totally agree. But then, where do you think we get our 3 branches from? God is our prophet, Jesus is our prophet, priest, and king. There we have our 3 branches of government. So if you look for it, you find this incredible Christian theology woven within government. In fact, good theology every single time leads to good government, and bad theology leads to bad government. Theology is primary, and of course you deny God, you have a whole lot of other problems. So a republic, just remember this, that a democracy is an empire of men, but if you have a government which reaches out to something that precedes and will be around an awful lot after we are, then you have a government that can really stand. But while we're talking about people, I'd like to talk real briefly about how you can choose a candidate, because we've talked about people and their impact and just a little bit about the process of government. But I really want to hit on what can you actually do to make a difference. What are some actionable steps to actually make your world a better place, to actually somehow get your Christian worldview in your government, because we've kind of covered that it matters. But how do you find your Wilberforce? And the crying shames that Wilberforces are at a great premium. In fact, history has created precious few of them. And this is really common sense, so we'll go through it quick, but I like it to be in your mind. So the first thing is, where do they stand? Do they have conviction? Like, sometimes people say, I believe this, this, and that, and that you can sometimes get a very strong sense that they don't necessarily care as deeply about it as you do. Maybe it's just political. And of course, don't fall for showmanship, and of course some people just sound wooden even if they really, really care a lot. But then check where they stand on the issues, and then check if their voting record matches with where they stand. And from there, you can try to figure it out. And if they say one thing and vote another, they're a liar, right? So you have to check that one and understand that. But then, are there any major personal flaws? And this is not necessarily, it's not unpopular, but it's also not a popular school of thought to say that character flaws disqualify someone from leadership. Now, I don't mean minor irrelevant flaws, like do they leave their socks on the floor is not important to civil government, right? But there are other major personal flaws that absolutely matter, because a double-minded person is unstable in all their ways, right? You can't be one person at home and another person in government, because your character is your character, even if you try to dress it up and make it sound better somewhere else. And I think a remarkable point in American history was when Clinton had his great moral failing in the White House, that there was a lot of people that rose up and said, so what? Why does it matter? Why is this something that we're talking about? It should be a non-issue. And it shouldn't be a non-issue, because like I said, a double-minded person's unstable in all their ways. And Wilberforce had a standard he held his personal life to and his political life to, and it was the exact same standard. And we should all strive to be the exact same way, and we should hold our politicians to that. So choose a standard, and you have to find the candidate that best reflects your values, right? You're never going to find someone that you totally agree with in absolutely everything. And I think that's a really wonderful thing, because it means you're a free thinker, that you can't be, that you and another person can't reliably be the exact same way. So that's wonderful. But there should be several main issues which are uncompromisable when you pick your candidate. And we compare every candidate to the other. Like I said, there's not going to be one that's perfect, but there might be one that's least imperfect. And then don't let a politician be your standard. And this is a trap that a lot of people fall into without ever thinking that they've fallen into the trap. They'll support someone somewhere along the line, and from that point on, everything that person does is going to be absolutely perfect. And no one acknowledges that they do this, but nearly everyone does this, at least to some extent. So try your very best not to, because you should hold your politicians to a standard, not your standard to a politician. But once you've found your candidate you support, you've found your Wilberforce, well, what can you do to be involved? What can you do to get them in office so that they can actually start to make a difference in their legislatures? Well, the very first thing you need to do is find an outlet, right? You have to plug in somewhere. In one way, let's say it's a local race, nothing that big, you can talk to the candidate's campaign directly, especially if it's a nonpartisan race. That's probably the best way to do it. But then but if you're trying to get involved in, let's say, a larger race, you can't just call up a gubernatorial candidate. and say, hey, how can I be involved, right? They're way too busy. So the likely best way to do that is maybe walking to a local county office for the party of whatever candidate you support and say, hey, how can I be involved? And they would, of course, love to plug you in. But there's my favorite way of being involved. It's not available to every race everywhere, but is there a third-party group that's involved that's taking people on to help? Now, it's a little tricky because we've got the two main political parties and we've got third parties, way more than just one. But it's just a political saying that there's a third-party group that wants to elect a candidate because they're the most conservative, or the most liberal, they care the most about oil, which is their issue, or teachers, or whatever they happen to care about the most. And that's a third-party group. So that's actually where I did the bulk of my political activism, is in a third-party group. And I'll tell my story real quick in just a second. But that's how you can be plugged in. And any of those are great ways. It depends on the race. But what might you be asked to do? And one of the very first things you might be asked to do is phone banking. And what phone banking is you're in a room, hopefully with some friends. If you can get some friends with you, that makes it fun. Otherwise, it's just you talking to people for hours. So if you got some friends with you, then it can really become an activity. But what it is you're just calling people in the district that the candidate is hoping to be elected in and say, I really hope you vote for this candidate, here's why. Maybe you're just asking questions. But a lot of people don't see the value. Let's say you're months out from an election and you contact an official, or not official, you contact a person and you're calling them and say, hey, what do we hope, or rather, which of these issues do you care about and who do you plan to vote for in the upcoming election? Now, a lot of people think, well, you haven't done anything, you haven't convinced them of anything. But here's how it works, and so much of politics is won and lost on information alone. So if a candidate knows all the people in this particular precinct really care about this issue, but they're not sure who they're going to vote for, he can then go to the area and say, hey, I really care about these issues too, and here's why I'm the best candidate for them. And so many elections every year are going to be won and lost based upon that information alone. The very best way you can volunteer though is going door to door. Not only is it the most fun and probably the most character growing, it's also the most effective. There was a Yale study done that showed that going door to door was far and away the most time effective, most cost effective, and most effective period way of reaching voters and convincing them to vote for your candidate. So door to door matters. So that's the best way. And what that looks like is you just knock on a person's door and then you say, hey, I was hoping to talk to you for 30 quick seconds or whatever it is. Getting ahead of myself or behind myself. And it's really character growing. There's common sense, right? Don't go at night. Keep a buddy with you, stuff like that. But I can, when I first started, it was like really imposing because it's not like mortal peril, but you just really want to get it right because you don't want to look silly on someone else's door like that. So you very quickly sharpen your conversational teeth, and this is really character growing, and it's really skill set growing. So I just think that everyone in the world should go door to door just a little bit in their life and understand it. And it's really a great opportunity. I don't have social media on here, not because I think it's going to put you in charge of their Instagram page. If they do, that's great. I hope you rise to the occasion. But I have it on there because I want you guys to take advantage of every medium that you have to have an influence in your circles. And if you're on Facebook or whatever, you might have a friend that posts like 12 political things a day. And as a result, it maybe gets lost in the wash. And it might all even be really quality stuff. But there might be some loss of influence to it. But I think some of the most effective times I've seen something political posted is someone says, hey, I really care about this issue, here's why, here's a news article about it. And it gets a lot of reaction because it means something, because it's been punctuated by the absence of noise from their end. So I just want you guys to think broadly about the ways you have to communicate with people. And then behind the scenes work, which is a surprisingly small part of politics. There's only so many letters you can stuff and only so many yard signs you can put together before you're out there actually making a difference and talking to people. Which is really good because you're being as effective as possible with your time. And then just talk to people. Hopefully you'll learn something, hopefully they'll learn something. Just keep those conversational lines open. But when you're talking to people politically, there's a lot of people who are very effective communicators, but you bring politics into the subject and they've totally lost their winsomeness. They can't speak as eloquently as they did before. Somewhere along the line, they just lose their ability to really be an effective speaker. And the very first political communication advice I have for you, and it's common sense, but it's don't belittle the person you're trying to speak to, because the instant you start insulting the person who holds the beliefs instead of the beliefs, you've lost the person too. Now, I admire great communicators an awful lot. And in particular, one of them is a fellow by the name of Ravi Zacharias, who you guys are likely a lot of you have heard of. Now, he's not compromising at all. Anyone who knows, what he's about doesn't say, oh, there's a soft guy who doesn't really believe in what he says he believes. Not a chance. But because of his tone, and he's got a saying that you can disagree without being disagreeable. Because of his tone, he's invited places where most of the time Christians are almost never invited to go. Places like the Kremlin to talk before atheist military officers of Russia. Places like Saudi Arabia, like the Mormon Tabernacle. He was, I think, the first person in 100 years to be invited to the Mormon Tabernacle who was an evangelical Christian. Things like that, because they accept his thoughts. Well, they might not agree with him, but they want his point of view because he's so respectful to people, while even sometimes, not viciously, but very, very strongly attacking ideas. And then have a conversation. So if when you're able to do that, you say, hey, what do you care about that? Or what do you care about this election cycle? And from there, you understand what they care about. Because you have to respond to what people care about. And from there, you're able to really make a difference in their minds. And then use facts, not pure emotion, but let me reverse that. Use emotion, not just pure facts. Because unless you're being both heard and felt, you have an argument that is very short of where it maybe needs to be. Where even if you're totally right and you have all the right facts, you can also be totally unconvincing because you have not been felt. And I hope you guys feel deep inside what you care about and what you say you care about. From that passion, hopefully you have an argument that is not only heard, but is felt. And then don't use all your time on one person. Oftentimes you'll run into someone who will want to talk to you for literally hours. Some silver-haired old lady who just wants to talk to you. And eventually you have to say, hey, thanks for the cookies, but I really got to go. And I have been given cookies several times by old women going door to door. But that being said, be careful taking candy from strangers, okay?
You want to start with that?
Yeah, I know, right? People usually don't make that connection. I'm glad you did. And here you are taking food from a stranger. But then the question arises is, can I really make a difference? I had a friend once come up to me and say, Micah, does one vote even matter? And I really couldn't convince him at the time. But I was like, yeah, absolutely one vote matters. But even if a candidate wins by 1,000 votes, they do not turn to someone or to 999 of their supporters and say, your votes didn't matter. Why'd you even show up? How do you pick the 999 which ones that don't matter? What separates a valuable vote from an invaluable vote? Because elections have consequences. Someone needs to win. Right, but even on an even more real sense, every year you're going to see a few, especially local level elections, where someone would have won if they'd only got 3 other family members to vote for them, right? So these are in very real terms, yeah, it matters. But real quick, I'd just like to talk about how I got into politics. And I know I said 2 hours, I'll probably be 5-10 minutes past, if that's all right with you guys. You guys have too many great observations along the way. Also, it's probably just my fault. So, anyways, real quickly how I got into politics. And it's not a long story, but the very first election I remember is 2004. And I knew one candidate was going to ruin the world and the other one was going to let me keep eating breakfast in the morning. So I knew just by diffusion from my parents which candidate I supported. But after that election cycle came and went, I was obviously too young to really do anything in that one, but came and went. 2008 is the next one I really remember. And actually, probably for my age, it could have made a pretty good defense of why I preferred one candidate over the other. But the extent of my activism is I went door to door for like an hour for extra credit for a class, and that was all of it. 2010 midterms kind of came and went without my really being engaged or even following it well. But then 2012 rolled around, and there was a recall election in Wisconsin, which probably some of you heard about. It was a pretty big deal. And a lot of people on both sides of that got really, really hopped up. And as a result, there was people on both sides being pretty passionate about it, and I was one of them. I thought, no, I just have to do something. So I walked into a local party office and said, hey, my name is Micah Pearce, how do I help? And they loved it, because the entire county office was run by 2 women, notably not men, 2 women, who were in their, in their free time, trying to make it go around and doing a wonderful job with, the resources they have. And they just loved that there was someone who, maybe a few times a week would come and say, hey, I've got like an hour, can I do something for you guys? And that was it. That was the end of my political activism for that election cycle. But it was really very helpful, especially to those folks. So that came and went, and then I thought, I'll just do the same thing for the presidential election, because I sure cared about that one too. But then I got a call from Matt Batesel, who hired me for this job, but he was going to pay me to go door to door, and I thought getting paid to do what I was going to do for free sounds really, really good. So I went ahead and accepted that job. And from that job, I was able to, I guess, get this job. He must have liked what I did, and he thought of this all on his own. It was not my invention. Of course, I'll credit some providence for this. But I want to point to something pretty significant here. 2008, Micah was extra credit. In 2012, Micah, no real credit, walks into the county office and says, hey, how can I make a difference? Because in early 2012, I was thinking, you know what, Micah? You're not getting any younger. You should find some real direction in your life. And it's not that it wasn't successful in what I tried. It's just that I had no real singular passion and direction in my life that I wanted to apply myself to. So I was floundering just a little bit. So I did a wise thing, which I'm very glad I did. I thought, well, I know one place I can go for direction is if I can pray about this. So I prayed, and I was in the Word just a lot. I'm often convicted that I'm not today as invested as I was then, and I try to be. But there was one thought that occurred to me then and has rattled around in my mind ever since then. It has not left. That when God was picking a leader for the kingdom of Israel after Saul had failed, he went and had Samuel go to Jesse, and all of Jesse's sons marched in front of Samuel. And Samuel would go, surely this one, Lord, he sure looks like a king. God would go, not that one. And all of his sons march in front of him, and Samuel